Welcome to step 5 in our dramatic beauty portrait retouching tutorial. In this part of the tutorial, I'll be showing you guys how I do my black and white conversion. So since the last video, I've continued with my process of my negative dodge and burn. I've also corrected some small minor issues in saturation. So right here on the nose is a little bit desaturated. So I just fixed those color tones. And now I'm ready for my black and white conversion. Now, I want to show you guys when you're actually converting to black and white and just trying to desaturate your image, there's a couple of ways that I recommend using your adjustment layers. The first one is your hue and saturation adjustment. So if you do this, and I turn this on, and simply just bring the saturation all the way down to -100, this is going to be the most accurate representation of the tones in your image being transferred into black and white. Now the other method that I use for this part is black and white. So adjustment layers, black and white. And what this does is actually going to change your image a little bit. So if you just watch here when I turn black and white on and off, it's subtle, but there are some changes in value. You can see the background changing a little bit. Hue and saturation is just desaturating my image. Black and white is actually assigning the colors in this image to black and white values. So if you're trying to get a very accurate representation, say you're desaturating so you can retouch, like when we're doing our negative dodge and burn, then you'd want to stay away from black and white because it would actually change the values in your image. But when you're finalizing your image, you're free to do whatever you like as long as it looks great. And I like this, having this control of being able to change the look of my image a little bit. So I'll show you guys what I've done. I'll delete these and go into my black and white folder. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change the blending mode back to normal so you guys can see what's going on. Opacity back up to 100%. And so what you can do is in your properties, you can select presets. So I have this selected to darker. If I just go through my presets, you can see high contrast blue filter has a dramatic change in my image, red filter, maximum black, maximum white. They're each going to change how the colors are assigned to values in your image. So for this one, I went ahead and selected darker. Now, here's the trick that I like to do before actually going into black and white. And even if you're not converting to black and white, you can use this method to pump up contrast in your image. I'm going to change this to soft light. And you can see I go back into color using this blending mode. Now, this doesn't look great, but if you turn your opacity fairly low, I usually start about 10% and see what that looks like. You can see it just gives a little bump. And let's go back up to 20% so you guys can see just a little bump in contrast. And so what I've actually elected to do here is go about 10-11% on a global adjustment, and then having the same exact darker preset, selectively deciding where I want another 20%. And so if you guys want to see my mask, you can see I'm just selecting the face, some areas on the hand as well, to add some selective contrast. All right, so that's using my black and white adjustment just to give some bump and contrast to my image before I go into black and white. And let's turn this down just a little bit. We'll go about 90% on the entire thing. So just before and after that step, it's not a huge difference, just a little bump in contrast. All right, and now I want to do my global levels change. And so this is one of my finishing steps. So I'm just bumping the contrast a little bit, finalizing my image. You can see that I've just pulled in a little bit more black, adjusted the midtone, and added a little bit more highlights. I've also changed my blending mode from normal to luminosity because I only want this to affect the luminosity and not the saturation. So put that back at luminosity. And then I've gone ahead and done the same thing where I'm doing some selective adjustments. So I'll hold down Option so you can see it's kind of similar to my black and white mask, mainly focusing on my subject's face, so not pulling as much contrast into the hair. So if I were to turn this off, you can see that it pulls the contrast into the background and the hair, which I didn't want to do. I've done my bump with my levels, and now I'm ready to convert over into black and white. So I've gone ahead and selected my hue and saturation. The reason being is I've already adjusted my image how I want it with my black and white adjustment layers, so I don't need to change any information. It's where I want it. So I'm simply taking my hue and saturation and desaturating down to 100%. Now you could very well decide to go with a black and white adjustment here and not change it to soft light, and it would have a similar effect. It's really, you're styling this to your taste at this point. It doesn't have to be an exact formula that you follow. And then I'm doing one final bump. So often when I convert from color to black and white, I want to add just a little bit more contrast. My feeling is that black and white can handle a little bit more contrast than a color image can. So you can see in this level adjustment, a little bit more black, a little bit more highlights, and adjusting that midpoint once again. This is very similar to the level adjustment that I used previously, but I'm just going in steps and adding a little bit more contrast to my final image. All right, so that is my black and white conversion. This image is almost complete. One of my final steps is going to be to add a little bit of noise. So I'll create a stamp visible. So going along with my 5 final steps to finishing any retouch video, adding noise is going to be one of my final steps. So filter, noise, add noise, and I'm going to go about 3% for this image. Hit OK, and that looks good. And that completes our black and white conversion and part 5 of our dramatic beauty portrait retouching tutorial.